is effective without, of course, shirking the local concerns that we also have to address on our campus.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, that even though the USG is supposed to be a public university system, the actual Board of Regents tends to be very much dominated by capitalist interests that that oftentimes don't even have educational backgrounds in these cases. But I guess sort of going off of what Yanni is asking here, in terms, all of you have been very active leaders in these efforts, but of course, given the unprecedented nature of this kind of crisis, are there things that have sort of changed in terms of your perception of the tech and the administration, or things that have changed your general approach to activism over this period?
Okay, well, I can jump in here. I've been here a while. I think this is my 17th or 18th year or something like that. Maybe that's not quite right. It's something like that. It's approaching 2 decades, and it wasn't always like this in the system. Like this, but what I mean by that is that we didn't always have this deference to the system leadership. And indeed, one of the things I mentioned a moment ago, where Georgia Tech would kind of go its own way, I think we acclimated to that maybe too much. Maybe we were even kind of overboard in perceiving ourselves as independent in certain moments in time, as kind of entirely independent, when in fact we are a unit of the university system and should be responsible in many different ways to the citizens of Georgia. In any case, we're in this moment now where we have a new president who was just hired last year, and as is done very commonly, a kind of closed, somewhat secretive process, which is, the reasons that sometimes happens are because supposedly it allows for a better pool, because if you were to reveal that you were looking for a job somewhere else at these high levels, then you're going to get fired from your other one, so you don't apply. And also, we had already experienced kind of a series of troubling circumstances and embarrassments before that. That includes the fiscal scandals, the shooting of Scout Schultz, and other matters that had sort of spelled doom for our last president, who was allowed an exit. So, I look at these things, and have for a long time, and those of you who are students and are tuning in, you may or may not pay attention to these sort of matters. I certainly didn't look at this kind of stuff when I was an undergrad or even a grad student. I was just doing my thing. But I think one of the things I've learned is just the extent to which the current pressure that the system, the chancellor, where it's coming from is a little bit unclear, is exerting not just on our institution, but on all of the institutions in the system. I knew that was the case, and it had been particularly urgent and extreme for a few years now. But I didn't realize how much it was the case, just how large and widespread that pressure and the problems that it produced were. So if we can make it through the pandemic and the economic calamity that it brings along with it, that circumstance is not going to change without without leadership change, or without some kind of policy change. And at the same time as that's going on, we're of course we're bringing on other leadership underneath it. So we're in the process of searching for a new provost to replace Raphael Bras, who's stepping down in a month or two, and the process by which that a search is taking place, and that's something that impacts all of you who are tuning in, because the provost runs the academic organization. So whether you're faculty, staff, student, grad student, undergrad, the individual in that position has an impact on your life. So we really do have to pay careful attention to the circumstances of incentive, the carrots and sticks that are in place, some of which we know and some of which we don't we don't understand yet, and really dig into it and try to figure out not only how it's working, but what we can do in order to remedy the ills in that process, and then also to encourage those in these positions um, um, to communicate what we can do and what they are doing to kind of wrest us from this feeling that we're in irons where we can't make any choices on our own.
Thanks. So
I want to.
Oh, sure.
If I can just build off that really quickly, I think it's also one of the things that has come to me over the course of this is, yes, we are in a particularly unique situation as this highly ranked technology school within USG, and USG being run the way it is. But also, a lot of what we can see that's going on here that we share with colleges and universities across the country point out to the incredible crisis in higher ed more generally, and how neoliberal policies have really reshaped higher ed in some very scary ways, right? So things like the sort of constant defunding of higher education, particularly public higher education, right? And we're in a state with a Republican supermajority, so of course, like, we're being defunded every year horribly, and they're now using coronavirus as an excuse to say, like, oh, well, we have to make all of these cuts, right? When really, like, they could invest more public money in the system and help us sort of weather the storm a little bit better, and they're not interested in that. But also, when I say neoliberal, I also mean things like the shifting of blame from institutions to individuals, right? So every town hall that has been run by GT administration that I've sat in for however many past weeks now, everyone constantly across the board has emphasized, well, you as faculty need to individually do this, that, and the other thing, and students need to individually take responsibility for their health. And that is bullshit that we have to call out, right? These are not individual problems, these are institutional problems, and we have to address them as problems that the institution who's creating them needs to fix.
And I'd like to also jump in on that point. I subscribe to everything that you just said. I think that in several meetings actually reminded me, it has come up with administrators who have suggested to students that you will be the ones who will decide whether or not we stay on campus, and it's all about you taking responsibility for your actions. And so with that, I'm always like, but if there is not a coherent plan in place for the students who are going to be 40 students living on a residence hall floor, and then there's that one shared bathroom that they all have to go to, that doesn't seem to be a personal responsibility matter. It's like, if the bathroom isn't cleaned and properly maintained, how do you expect students to not contract the virus or share the virus in that sort of setting? And the list goes on and on and on. And so I definitely agree that there has been that sort of feeling where people are trying to shift the blame to the individuals rather than the institutions who are forcing us to return taking responsibility. And then just one other point that I wanted to mention, I think over the course of the pandemic, I just have really been disheartened, frankly, by USG's response, because I knew that the decision-making was obviously far removed from our institution, so certain things don't happen. But I always come back to the pass-fail conversation that happened at the end of the spring semester, and how you had so many students who were just pouring out their hearts on social media saying that they need pass-fail. They're an international student, they're an out-of-state student, they're a student who is having challenges because they have a family member at home who might be very ill. And so it was just like, even in the face of that, there was no willingness by USG to create a uniform opt-in pass-fail system the way that other institutions across the country had. And so how does that put Georgia Tech students at a disadvantage? And so something like that, that was just so basic and the right thing to do in the middle of a crisis that no one could have seen coming, it was very disheartening, like how I was saying. And so I think that has sort of opened my eyes as an activist now to say, okay, well, we know how they're going to approach it. They're not going to take it as a compassionate issue the way they should. So we have to put pressure where we can. And so that's what I would say is really just changed the way I view the situation.
I would like to jump in and tie a Q&A question into this discussion at this point. So it was, what would it take for us to convince USG that we do not need to return to campus this year? It's too dangerous to return. And so I think this ties into the discussion we've been having where, you know, we have to recognize that the USG is not operating under the same incentives that we are operating under with respect to, you know, looking out for our own safety. The USG is operating under an incentive where, you know, set up by the state, where the state continuously defunds higher education. And then in response, the USG has to basically orient itself more and more like a business and treat the, you know, education that people are getting here like a product. And we've seen that in, you know, a statement from the chancellor of USG, Chancellor Wrigley, and he cited the need to return to campus this semester was because the students, you know, found it unsatisfactory when they were taking, you know, online courses in the fall. So, you know, to me, that stuck out to me as a very, like, the customer is always right attitude, where we're going to, you know, just do whatever it takes to sell this academic product to them. We're going to do whatever it takes to have people in the dorms, paying room and board, so we can, you know, sustain the overhead of effectively what is more and more becoming a business operation. And that's not how higher ed should be treated, in my opinion. So, you know, we need to kind of take this fight to the USG and even further up to the state government and say, you know, we don't want higher ed treated like a business. It's a public good that needs to be funded accordingly.
Okay, so I guess just our last question before we just go straight into audience Q&As. So I think a lot of you have brought up excellent points about kind of the institutional nature of a lot of the problems we're dealing with. And while there are definitely ways we can and we should pressure these institutions, I guess my question is, what are things we can do regardless of the administration's actions to, I guess, organize together and keep ourselves safe, either at an individual level or at more of a local community level? I guess, Kyle, perhaps you could start, since at least you certainly have experience working in student organizations. Right.
Yeah, I think there were some points that came up earlier about like underscoring the need to make sure that campus workers who are disproportionately folks of color are protected. And so that was something that, you know, struck really close to home for me, because I know that a lot of our advocacy for student government obviously has been for students. But I think one thing that we often forget about as students is that we have so much agency, and that we can't be fired. We can't be afraid that someone's going to essentially, you know, have some sort of retribution against us because we're speaking truthfully. And so I think that this is a moment where students really have to protect those who may not have that same sort of flexibility in all circumstances. And so I really think that going forward, there should be more partnerships. And certainly, I know YDSA is always doing work in this space, but making sure that we're trying to link arms as best we can with the staff at Georgia Tech, who may just need, you know, some more support when it comes to ensuring that they have safe options as well, because the way things currently stand, that is not clearly the case. And so I think that would be one way that I would say that we can, you know, just tie together and really try and use those ties to leverage our power to help other people out as well.
I want to pick up on a point that Ian made earlier, and say that cross-campus organization can also be really effective in raising the profile of any issue, but particularly the kinds of issues like pass-fail, or masks, or you know, remote option for everyone. There's a lot of really cool organizing. I have seen so much really cool organizing from students specifically over the past month. It's been really inspiring for me, and it has like helped me keep going. But there's so many cool things that are being done on all these different campuses, and Georgia State's not far from us, right? You want to talk about like just reach out, just a couple of miles away. But also, the students who are at schools like University of North Georgia, right, who are also organizing around this issue. I see them on Instagram. So if you as students can look around and reach out and say, where are there other organizers on other campuses and how can we link up, and have a better chance of being heard, and also have a chance for advocacy around the things that are going to keep you safe, keep all of us safe, regardless of what the administration does, which are, of course, asking peers to wear masks, social distancing, trying to keep people from going to parties, et cetera. I know these are all these stupid individual things I was just railing about, like, how dare you? And yet they are also really important, right? So it's kind of like a weird balancing act where you have to say, like, for one thing, you have to discourage your peers from going to parties. And then on the other hand, you have to tell the administration loudly and collectively, don't blame us if we go to parties. Like, you're the ones who brought us here. So both things at once, I guess.
I mean, this is a great point that Alex makes about amassing power in and strength in numbers. And at Georgia Tech, I don't know. It's we have a tendency sometimes to be a very kind of regulated place. Maybe it's because we're an engineering school. I don't know, that we like rules, actually, and everyone likes them. The faculty likes them. The students like them. Like, I want it to go this way. I want to change the rules, but I want rules. I want structure. And I understand that, and I appreciate it to a certain extent, at least. But one way of approaching this circumstance is within the at least a semblance of the boundaries that we've been given, to just take the flexibility and interpretive opportunity that we have, and just take it like it's yours, and if you can get a group of students together, then it's much easier to do that, because you have a kind of collective behind you. But this is also true of the faculty, who have finally kind of been realizing, okay, well, maybe it's our classroom, and we're going to figure out how to do what we want to do within on the students' behalf, not just for their sake. Within the constraints that have been provided, and rather than going and asking for permission, oh, is someone going to ask me this, or someone going to check in on this? Like, just do it, just do it. So the student communities locally are a great idea. If there are faculty that are on the call with us today, the local AAUP chapter, the American Association of University Professors chapter, is one place that we've been collecting and organizing. So join up with that, or encourage your professors to do so. And that's sort of our version of what the SGA has been doing. And another, just a small thing for, this is not the only thing you should be doing, but when you're on social media and you're talking to one another, our president's pretty active, at least on Twitter, and maybe may not respond, but I believe is reading the post that he gets tagged into. If you're whether you are or aren't a local Georgia voter, this is a legislative process, and the question of how the USG ought to work is certainly a matter that's subject to legislative change. So writing to your General Assembly members is something you can do. Writing to the governor. The students and the parents have the most ability to get attention. The faculty and staff have much less of it. And then one other comment I'll make is the Georgia Tech subreddit. You may or may not know this if you hang out there, but the administration reads it. They don't always reveal that they read it, but the stuff that gets posted there makes the rounds. And I think that's a good thing. It's not. I sometimes lament that it's the only thing that we have sometimes, and it only represents a portion of the community's interests. But it is one source, so that, you know, I say that not to scare you off, but rather to encourage you to use that forum, because it's a central place where I know that folks are looking. But those are just a few examples.
I guess, Brett, do you have any thoughts here before we move into audience questions?
No, I think I'm good. I think we can move into audience questions.
Okay. So moving from the sort of places people are asking questions, both in the chat and in the queue. Sort of moving back to some of these asked in chat, though, and perhaps combine some similar points being. So Andrew Nguyen brought up a good point about how they think it might be a good idea for Georgia Tech to provide some kind of care package to all of those who are going back campus. And then Miggy mentioned the having a 2-week quarantine on campus, and where we can have the first 2 weeks online, and then after that potentially a return to campus. So I guess just kind of compiling a lot of these suggestions from people together. What do people think here in terms of how effective these ideas might be?
So I'll just speak to the care package one. So I assume by that you mean like a care package of like PPE supplies that students will need. I think that's absolutely necessary, because if you expect college students to follow social distancing procedures and keep everything clean, then, you know, many of them they come here and they don't have cars, they don't have easy way to get to the store. They need these supplies in order to do that. So I think that's a very obvious thing to do, is distribute PPE to students in a very easy way. So that could come in the form of a care package, or it could, you know, come in many forms. But the idea that students need easy, cheap, or not cheap, but free access to PPE is completely essential, and they should do something about that, in my opinion.
I'll say, in terms of the idea about doing a 2-week quarantine on campus right at the start of the semester, I actually think that's a great idea, in part because it addresses this issue that international students are having, where they've been asked to show up like in 2 days and pay an exorbitant amount of money to be allowed to quarantine on campus, which I think is shameful, and just the grossest money grubbing like ever. I was in a town hall specifically for Britain Fellows with the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, Colin Potts, this morning. And he actually said, one of the things he said was he doesn't recommend holding in-person meetings for the first couple weeks of class, in part because it's chaotic and students switch around a bunch as they're doing drop ad, but also just because it's going to be sort of so strange for us all to be back. And so, again, I wish this is a thing that the institution would like go ahead and just tell us to do, but it is like the low-key secret wink wink info that some people are getting. So maybe putting more pressure, maybe through SGA, putting more pressure on getting these ideas in front of the people who can like actually implement them at a broader level would be really good.
So it looks like Jordan Taylor has a question bouncing off of what Kyle mentioned with respect to housing. Many of the conversations around reopening focus on coursework, but students spend more time in dorms than in classrooms. So how should we think of the role of student housing in reopening as both a COVID vector and a university revenue stream? So I guess maybe we can start out with Kyle, since you've been mentioned in that question.
Yes, so I was just pulling up my notes here to make sure that I was answering the question correctly. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I think there are a lot of great points there regarding housing. I would say that there have been some plans that have been released that Georgia Tech Housing is trying to make things hopefully as painless as they can given the circumstances regarding, for example, move-ins and trying to have scheduled move-in time so that way those places won't be crowded. Um, I'm trying to see the question here, Nikhil. Is it in
Oh,
the...
sorry, I'm a little bit new to this. I marked it as answered already, but
Oh, okay.
under the answer tab, it's what Jordan Taylor asked. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. I'll, I guess, try to answer then just based off of the general concern about housing as well. I think that there are real concerns there. I mean, a lot of students, Georgia Tech is a densely populated place, and I don't know if folks who are doing all this planning really like have taken that in all the way. And I know a lot of people have done a lot of thinking about these things, but there are certain spaces, for example, yesterday in our SGA town hall, we were getting questions about what about laundry rooms? When folks are doing their laundry? What about when you're just, in there are study spaces, and so obviously those shared spaces probably won't be as accessible. And what does enforcement look like for the visitor policy? Because they're trying to limit visitors. So I think that there are a lot of legitimate questions around housing that still, frankly, have yet to be answered in some instances. And so that's going to be something that we have to watch closely. But if there's anything specific, I can also refer to some of the things that we have from our SGA side that, if it's a specific question about when will such and such happen. I know there have been questions about housing fees, for example. I can answer those too.
I want to jump in and say also, Jordan, I think that this question is immensely perceptive in that you are absolutely right. Student housing will both play a role as a COVID vector, a very dangerous role, and that's not students' fault. That is the fault of the people who are also banking on it as a revenue stream, right? The university is a landlord. They need to make money off of you. It's unfortunate, it's kind of scary. It's one of the things about this kind of corporatization and neoliberalism in higher ed that has been growing and getting worse and worse over the past probably 50 years. So when we talk about like we want to make decisions based on a certain set of principles and administration wants to make decisions based on a different set of principles, this is what they mean is they need to make the decisions based on like how much money they can get from you. And housing is absolutely one of those.